Hello and welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. My name is David Zipper. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative, and I'm coming to you from the occupied city of Washington, D.C. And I'm joined by Wes Marshall, who's not in D.C.
Not in DC. We've not yet been occupied, but we'll see how long that holds off on.
And what do you do, Wes?
I am a professor of civil engineering at the University of Colorado, Denver.
Very good. And we are really glad that you're here, whether you're joining us live or if you are listening afterwards or watching afterwards via YouTube or a podcast platform of your choice. Just really quick before we jump in, I'll just note this is our third episode of Look Both Ways, and it's really been great. It's actually been a lot more fun, and we've got a lot more feedback, I think, from all of you than at least more than I was expecting. Won't speak for Wes, but it's been great. We've heard from folks from New Zealand to Belgium to San Francisco, often with really thought-provoking responses to the issues that we're delving into around transportation. And I appreciate almost all the comments. There was the one guy who encouraged Wes to keep giving me crap for sometimes choosing a cider over a beer, which I didn't appreciate, but it is what it is. But it is really great to just see people sort of getting into things, which is what we're hoping for. But Wes, maybe you want to say a quick something about why cider sucks or something else, perhaps.
No, I think it's a fair criticism, but I'll leave that for another day. But no, yeah, you're right. It's been fun to hear from, honestly, a lot of people I haven't heard from in a while saying that they've been checking out the podcast and they seem to like it so far. And since we're having fun, I think that's a good combination. So hopefully we can keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's dive right in.
All right.
The way we like to sort of begin is with a segment that we call Word on the Street, which is where we talk about a sort of issue in the news. And
slow down, man. Back it up.
Oh, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
You did.
I jumped ahead. It's my fault. You know what? Before I do that, I want to ask you a question, Wes. Were you traveling somewhere recently? Sorry.
Yes. No, last week I was up in Calgary. I was up in Banff. So I checked out both those places. Yeah.
What'd you learn?
Well, Calgary, it was really interesting. On one hand, there's so much good stuff in terms of like the multi-use trails they had, especially like along the river. It was also cool to see how they paralleled the highways in a lot of places, even as you headed out towards rural areas. At the same time, every time you turned around, there was another highway. So it reminded me a little bit of Eric Guerrera's book, Overbuilt, because they're facing the same issues as we are, including in downtown, where they seem to have these 5-lane arterials with almost nobody on it. And we were there at times that what should have been rush hour, and these places were pretty empty. So yeah, it was interesting. The other thing I did note too is that on a lot of streets, although not everywhere, they had a really good mix of housing. So you'd see the single family homes mixed in with townhouses and apartments, like all on the same street, which was cool to see as well.
That's great. That's great. You and I actually spent some time in Toronto. How did it feel strikingly different in terms of the urban design in that way?
Yeah, it felt very different from Toronto. It felt, I guess
I've never been to Calgary. I have no concept really.
It's a smaller town for sure, but they have some big city vibes when you get downtown. And it's similar to Colorado in terms you go an hour away and you're in Banff, you're in the mountains, and it's a whole another world. Like from here in Denver, I can go an hour west, and again, it's a whole nother world. So, there's more similarities to that than Toronto is definitely a bigger city. Like the Calgary Tower isn't nearly as big as the one in Toronto. So it looks similar, but not quite there. So yeah, no, there's a lot of similarities, but there's definitely some differences. And and it was really interesting to see.
And how did you get around Banff, out of curiosity?
One of my buddies signed us up for a bus tour. So we met Teddy, our bus driver in Canmore. He picked us up and he kind of took you to like Moraine Lake, Lake Louise. And these are some of the most beautiful places you've ever seen. The water, the color of the water is just incredible. In terms of transportation, obviously parking's an issue, but in part because there's so many people there. Every time we got off the bus, there's like a zillion people. Like it was hard to even walk around, and you kind of envied the people that had like a kayak or something out on the water. So yeah, you
Interesting.
were able to still get some great pictures and still get some kind of walking around time. But I will say we also stopped in downtown Banff to have lunch, which was cool too. We got to walk around there for like an hour before and after lunch, and it was similar to what I was just saying about Calgary because you turn around and there's like highways, like
Yeah.
you've left downtown when you sort of hit a highway, but again, parallel to the highways and also set off. I didn't mention that before. Like these multi-use
Yeah.
trails are not right on the edge; they're set back, so you felt totally safe even though you're sort of walking along a highway. So it's kind of
Hmm.
some good and some bad about that situation, but it was interesting to see. And that town itself reminded me a lot of some of our mountain towns here in Colorado, but it's still really cool.
It's interesting. Do you know the history a little bit about like where how wilderness and parks came to be like 100 years ago, and how the automobile played a huge role with that? There's a
I mean, the story they kept telling us was when they were doing the railroad in
yeah,
Canada 100 plus years ago, and like these places, like the national parks, were founded when the people kind of forging ahead of the railroad were trying to figure out a way to make money off of what they were doing because they were putting all the money into the railroad. They felt like they had to recoup some money from that. And they would find these sort of beautiful places, and then they would go to the Canadian government and be like, "Oh, do you mind if I buy this?" And when like a
hmm.
bunch of people would do that to the same place, the government's like, "Hey, wait a second, like maybe we should go take a look before we sell it to somebody." And that's sort of how at least those national parks came to be there. But I don't know about the car side of it that you're mentioning.
Yeah, no, it's just so I came a little bit prepared. There's a book, again, this is a little bonus for those who are watching instead of listening. There's a
Woo-hoo.
book I read a couple of years ago called Driven Wild by Paul Sutter. The subtitle is How the Fight Against Automobiles Launched the Modern Wilderness Movement. Which is just sort of interesting. I don't pretend to be an expert in this, but when people really started camping was right after World War One, and people had cars then, right? It was after the Model T and everything, and there was this real sudden worry about basically people from cities driving out and making a mess and littering and polluting basically everywhere, because there are all these
No
pictures you
way.
can find of the 20s. Yes, believe it or
That
not,
never happened.
of like tin cans and just
Preposterous.
gunk all over these like beautiful areas like Yosemite and stuff like that. So there was, yeah, it's actually, I mean, we take the term wilderness for given, but it kind of had to be sort of created conceptually by people like Aldo Leopold and Bob Marshall. And it created this really interesting question. And I think it's still an ongoing tension, as I understand it, in a lot of the environmental movement, of whether sort of like beautiful places of nature should be places that are easy to reach, meaning by car usually, or if it should be places that are set aside, that nobody is driving to, that are inaccessible, because you can feel like you are really in the middle of nowhere when you're there, and it's better for the creatures and the ecosystems as well. I find it a really interesting tension. I don't know if that's something that you've experienced. You're in Colorado, one of the more beautiful parts of this country. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and it's tough because a lot of those beautiful parts you sort of have to get to by car. I mean, I will say there are DOT's done a better job with the bus staying in terms of, or CDOT, the Colorado DOT has a bus that goes to some of these places, which is
Yeah.
a relatively new thing that's been working. But even in Banff, like if you read the brochures, like, they kind of sell it as a, um, I don't know, some sort of utopia where you don't even need a car to get around. It's not quite that. It reminds me when I did work on Nantucket years
Hmm.
ago, and part of what they were responding to when they hired us was, somebody wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times. It's like, oh, I read I can go to Nantucket and not have a car. That's BS. Like, I totally needed a car.
It's
And that's
funny.
kind of the same thing in a lot of these places. Like the brochures make it seem like one thing, like this alpine utopia that's carless and
Yeah.
car free, but it's not quite that.
Do you ever go to Zion Park in southern
No,
Utah?
I've not. No.
It's gorgeous. I know that I don't know the history in detail, but there, it's like I think in some of the most popular parks, you basically can only drive to a very limited number of places, and then you've got little shuttle buses bringing you around. And apparently, that's been transformative. I bet some listeners will have more insights into this than I can offer. But you go back 30, 40 years to Zion, and it was just like traffic jams all over. You couldn't escape the sound of automobiles, and now those buses have really made it a more sort of like calming, natural place for a very popular park. I find it, I don't know, I find it kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was in Yellowstone last summer. I was doing a talk up in Big Sky, so we went through Yellowstone on the way, and we were just stuck in traffic
Yeah.
for like we barely moving for like 45 minutes at a time because a couple buffalo crossed the street. And like where I live in Colorado, like I can go a couple miles and see buffalo without, or bison technically, I mean, without too much of a problem.
Yeah.
And there, like everyone is like they saw a woolly mammoth or something, and nobody moved.
I still think the weirdest road sign along those lines I've ever seen. I was in South Africa once, and there were literally hippopotamus crossing signs. I was like,
I
well,
took a picture
I'm
of
stopping if I see one. Go ahead.
a
Yeah,
penguin crossing sign in Australia. We went to
that's pretty good.
an island that is just filled with these penguins, and we watched them like come home from their daily, I guess, feeding, hunting, and they literally all these penguins have a party. They're singing, they're dancing, and you just sort of watch there. And one of the signs was the penguin crossing. Another one is you need to check behind your wheels before you drive away in case
Yeah,
there's a penguin kind of hanging out there.
that's awesome. I'm jealous. I've never been to Banff. I've never been to Alberta. So, you know, one of these days I'll make it. But I think this whole issue or this whole topic area of transportation and the environment or transportation ecosystems is sort of rich for more exploration. Perhaps we can have a segment on it in the future. I'd love, like, you actually, do you know there's a fellow Coloradan, Ben Goldfarb, who wrote Crossings about road ecology. Do you know him? He's in the southern part of the state.
The name
Ring a
sounds
bell?
familiar.
He's a good guy. It's a
Honestly,
great
I'm
book.
not the best with names, so maybe I did meet him.
Oh, you might have met him, but he wrote a great book about how roads affect ecosystems just a couple
Oh, that's
years
great.
ago, and it's a pretty deep topic in a new field entirely. So, anyway, let's talk about the news, shall we?
All right. Yes.
So we call this section "Word on the Street," where we pick a topic that's been in the news recently that Wes and I think is interesting and worthy of dissection, if you will. And the topic du jour is a recent court case from Florida, in which Tesla was found partially liable for a pretty horrific crash that occurred in 2019. Maybe I'll give some really quick facts about it, and then love to hear your thoughts, Wes. I've got some I'll share myself. But the basic facts of what happened in this collision in 2019 was that a driver in a Tesla was approaching a T intersection pretty fast, like about 50 miles per hour, using autopilot. He at the intersection, he dropped his phone and kept right on going through the intersection because his phone was on the floor. He was reaching for it. The vehicle struck an SUV at the end of the T, and next to that SUV were apparently a couple who were stargazing, just standing there, pedestrians. One of those pedestrians was killed. The other one was seriously injured. So what happened was that in the court case, which was a very big deal, like Missy Cummings gave expert testimony. Some of you will know her as a robotics professor, George Mason, or a longtime critic of Tesla. The jury found Tesla partially responsible for, or partly liable for this crash, or the injuries and damage that was really inflicted on the pedestrians in particular. The jury basically assigned Tesla 1/3 responsibility, as I understand it, about $243 million in damages. It's going to be appealed, but this is really the first decision of its kind where Tesla Autopilot is found liable. And the way that it was really argued was that Elon Musk and Tesla had exaggerated publicly the capabilities of Autopilot, leading this driver to think that he was going to be safe, as he said, actually. He thought that Autopilot would prevent him from being in a crash. And that for that reason, not only did the driver make a mistake by not jumping in to take over at the last minute, but Tesla is partly responsible for the crash as well. And the jury obviously agreed. Wes, there's a lot there. Before I go any further, what do you think?
So correct me if I'm wrong. So I think Tesla argued that the autopilot shut off before the crash actually happened. Like, is that what their argument was?
Yeah, well, that among other things. Part of it is
Yeah.
that the driver made a mistake, so the driver's liable, not the company. And there's questions whether Tesla Autopilot is programmed to automatically go off a split second before a crash, because then the company can avoid liability.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, if you watch Mark Rober's video very closely, that's what happened when he ran the Tesla through that Wile E. Coyote wall.
Yeah.
Like it shut off right before it was going to hit the wall. So maybe there's something to that. But bigger picture, like the fundamental issue is they call it autopilot, and it's not. Like they can't call it autopilot or self-driving or autonomous and then make you read the fine print to say, by the way, it's not really that.
Yeah.
Like, so that's always been my, just visceral reaction to it. It's like, oh my God, like stop calling it autopilot because it's not.
What are you trying to say, that full self-driving isn't actually full self-driving? Is that what you're implying?
Well, I mean, I would trust some companies more than others for sure. And, Tesla is one where they've been overselling it for a long time. Like if you read, I dug into this a few times for various reasons, and it's like, that's just not true. That's just not true. And you can kind of go through the list and it doesn't add up. And then they just have, like a thing you have to agree to before you use their so-called autopilot that puts you on the hook should, you not be paying attention when the autopilot fails on you. So it just doesn't make any sense. Like they need to, some of the earlier iterations of the Tesla autopilot weren't that different than my wife's Subaru Crosstrek, which has, the advanced, it's not self-driving, but it speed corrects on the highway. Yeah, it's stuff. It keeps you in the lane, so it's doing sort of all the stuff you expect of self-driving on the highway. But they don't even come close to calling it autopilot or self-driving. Like it's
no,
it's not that at all. So there's just a huge disconnect between what it is and what they're selling it as, which I find problematic and honestly dishonest.
Well, it's not an accident. I mean, I've looked into Tesla for a while around these issues, and it's important, I think, keep in mind that Tesla sort of distinguishes itself from other automakers, and it's gotten a competitive advantage, I would argue, because it plays fast and loose with regulations and with labeling in this sort of a way. Like, you're right, GM and Ford and Subaru would never use a term like autopilot or full self-driving. But Tesla knows that, and they do it because they're like, well, we can then look like we're further ahead than the competition, although they're not. And it sort of actually undermines the credibility of the entire auto industry. It's why Tesla is kind of hated by a lot of the car companies that it competes with, because people realize that if there's a crash, that something like what happened in Florida, it makes everybody in the industry look bad to a degree with their ADAS systems. And that's what Tesla has in autopilot and full self-driving. It's a driver assistance system. And you're supposed to, as the driver, always be paying attention and able to jump in whenever necessary to correct. It's just that humans are really bad about always paying attention when they have nothing to actually do. Which is inevitable with these sorts of level 2 systems.
And that's been proven. Like the other thing that drives me crazy is the fact that they refuse to use like the most advanced technology, like LiDAR, to solve the problem. Like their thinking is because my eyeballs can see, then cameras can see, which I guess makes sense if you don't think about it for more than 2 seconds. But, it doesn't work like in bad weather or right. Like there are reasons why LiDAR, and going back to that Mark Rober video when he compares the Tesla without LiDAR and it just ran right through a wall because it looked like a road. Like that's sort of the problem when you're not using LiDAR. And that's, if it's dark and you can't like see the pedestrian ahead of you, LiDAR can see. I mean, that also came up with that, the crash that I talk about a lot in my book, the first pedestrian fatality from the Uber autonomous car. The LiDAR saw her. The LiDAR saw her. And that's what LiDAR has the ability to do and see way before humans can. But like the way they treated that crash was not anywhere like that. They treated it as if it was a human driver. It's like, oh, it was dark. The car couldn't see her. It's like what the LiDAR could. And Tesla refusing to use it, it just doesn't make a ton of sense other than saving a few bucks. Because I mean, the cost of LiDAR are dropping considerably too. Like, why not? I mean,
but that I think is it. This is not, I mean, Musk will say, oh, well, LiDAR is superfluous. Our technology is just better. We don't need it. At the end of the day, it's cheaper. Like, this is why I really hold like NHTSA and Congress responsible for the failures around Tesla. All of these supposedly innovative things like, oh, we don't need LiDAR, or, we like Tesla also, like we are going to put every control onto a touch screen. Those are just ways of saving money. Touch screens are a lot safer, they're a lot cheaper than knobs and buttons, but they're more dangerous. And the fact that NHTSA has not intervened to basically say, look, no, Tesla, this is not a way that you can have competitive advantage by basically sacrificing safety, to me, is regulatory failure on the part of the federal government. And I think, the other point I would make about the lawsuit in Florida is I think it's important that it was pedestrians who were the plaintiffs here, because I've made this point for a long time. I really believe it. It's one thing for Tesla to argue, which is debatable, that if you buy a Tesla and use autopilot, you're agreeing to the limitations and the risks of doing so.
Yeah.
But it's another to basically treat everybody on a public road as a guinea pig if you're walking or biking or inside another kind of car. And that's what Tesla has effectively done. It's unethical, it's wrong, but it's something that the federal government has never stepped in and said, no, you can't do this. And that to me is something that is frankly outrageous. And so I hope this is a precedent-setting case in Florida, because we really need to recognize that Tesla, left to its own devices, is going to put all of us at risk. It already is.
You're totally right, because you and I have never clicked on yes to those terms and conditions that Tesla puts out for autopilot.
No. And nobody who owns a different kind of vehicle or walks or bikes is agreeing to anything. We're all being treated like guinea pigs for Elon Musk. And I resent that. I think that's unethical behavior by a company. But more than that, I think it's failure on the part of our regulators, who are supposed to be defending your safety, my safety, and the safety of everybody else in this country. I can't hear you. Give me 1 second. I may be having a bit of a mic challenge, so give me 1 minute. I'm just going to swipe. I think the mic is all right. It's actually my headphones. 1 second. You there? That's exciting. 1 second. All right. How about now? Can you hear me? Well, this is... Oh, it's... If you can hear me, we are having a bit of technical difficulties. And Wes, it seems like Wes is working on figuring it on your end. Is that right, Wes? Okay. So I'm just going to sit here right now and thank you for being here and bearing with us. I had a friend who said, oh, it's interesting that you and Wes have decided to make this a live podcast, because that sort of like lowers the degree of expectation that everything goes smoothly. And I said, great, exactly. That's precisely what we're looking for, because God knows that we can mess things up. And here in episode 3, you're actually seeing that. So thank you for bearing with us. Wes just left for a moment. He's going to reconnect, and I'm just going to go quiet for a moment to let him come back.
Hello, hello.
Can hear you.
You can't see you,
but we can hear you.
Can't see me.
Correct.
All right. Well, let's keep talking while I work on the camera.
All right. That totally works for me. I can. Are you ready to enter Roundabout, Wes?
Yeah, we can do that. So I'm not sure where my camera is, but see what happens here. All right, so we're going to talk more about Elon Musk
podcast. Yeah. I think we could. Did you have a final thought on Elon Musk? I think we've.
No, we're going to go right into more Elon Musk.
Oh, good.
My first topic is the Boring Company.
Yes,
which is a great name for a company, but a fairly dumb idea. So in my book, I compare it to the Stranger Things upside down version of the Norman Bell Geddes Futurama exhibit.
Yeah.
And I then compare Elon Musk to Lyle Lanley, the guy who talked Springfield into buying his monorail, even though, as Marge clearly points out, Main Street remains all cracked and broken.
This is for those who don't know, this is like the most beloved Simpsons episode ever among urban planning nerds. So just really quick, go ahead, Wes, by all means.
Hey, my camera's back.
We see you.
All right. Yeah. But the real problem is that these tunnels all run into the same fundamental problems the Futurama runs into. So anyways, a couple weeks ago, I think I guess the word skeeted, is that what you tell me it is?
Skeeted, yes. Blue sky.
I feel like it should be bleeded. Like, anyways, a chart showing
bled,
like blue sky,
like
bleeded like a sheep.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. It's not.
We're getting off topic.
Better for us. Please go on. Yeah.
Well, you skeeted a chart showing how little digging that this company has actually done. So despite promises of a couple 100 miles dug by now, they have 4 miles that is in use in Las Vegas.
And that's it.
Instead of promising to finish in Vegas or DC or Chicago or LA or like all the other cities they had promised this to, like Fort Lauderdale, Dubai, like they're now breaking ground in like Nashville. So I don't know if you saw that New York Times article about Nashville. One of the things that made me laugh out loud about that is the problem that they're dealing with. Let me read to you the quote. I have it right here.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little what's happening in Nashville? I think a lot of folks won't be familiar necessarily.
Well, the Boring Company has promised to create a tunnel that goes from downtown to the airport, and Nashville is saying great. And it sounds like it's the state. I mean, we can get into who's saying yes to this, but the quote that made me laugh was officials hope it would reduce the downtown to airport commute, typically at least 15 minutes in regular traffic, to as few as 8 minutes.
But I laugh too, but honestly, Wes, it's at least 15 minutes. It might be 17 minutes. So that's got to be worth millions upon millions of dollars. Definitely to save those, 9 minutes there.
15 minutes to get to the airport from any downtown sounds amazing. I don't know what is happening in Nashville. I know, related to this, like my undergraduate thesis was actually on the trenchless tunneling that was happening in the Big Dig in Boston. Like into my 21-year-old brain back then, when I was choosing on a thesis and I was more on the structural side of engineering, I thought it was kind of cool how they were building the Big Dig tunnels without tearing up the city with the traditional cut and cover techniques. But once I guess, pun intended, dug into things, I realized that it was not that easy to build tunnels like this in real cities. And like in the end, my thesis ended up focusing more on the 27 acres of land that Boston was reclaiming by taking the elevated freeways and putting them underground. But the tunneling part was always tricky. And like as Seattle found out, like tunneling under real cities is hard. And as Nashville will probably find out soon, because they have what the article mentions, a lot of limestone bedrock. Again, it's not going to be that easy. And to what end? To what benefit? It seems going from 15 to 8 minutes to get to the airport. It's like, don't we have other things we could be focusing on?
Yeah, and what's striking, I think it's important to note what happened with that Nashville announcement. The city was not involved. Local officials were not there. They're not supportive. This was a collaboration between state Republicans who have already preempted the hell out of Nashville and sort of stomped all over that city because it's sort of a Democratic stronghold. This is a deal between the state Republicans and Elon Musk's supported company. I think it's important to keep in mind. It's also particularly sad because Nashville right now has a mayor who was recently elected and was really elected. You may know this. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he was a transit advocate for a long time. And he has a whole program going to make the city more walkable and transit friendly and really sort of like prepare it for growth that doesn't rely on using cars to get around. And if this happens, which is a giant if with the Boring Company, it's really a slap in the face of that entire effort. Because, when the Las Vegas Loop was initially proposed, that was going to be like this autonomous pod futuristic thing. It ended up being one-way tunnels with Teslas in it, right? And now they're actually saying, no, this is going to be a tunnel with Teslas in it. The Boring Company's going to buy a bunch of Teslas for it. And I just find it to be just really, I feel I have empathy for those in Nashville because there are some cities that have sort of fallen for the BS of the Boring Company. like Rahm Emanuel did when he was mayor of Chicago, some might recall a few years ago, and there was
Yeah.
an issue in southern Florida. I think it was Daytona Beach, but don't quote me on that. But Nashville's not like that. Nashville knows better, and the state is just basically running roughshod over them. Like, local governance be damned.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you go way back in time, like they were selling the Hyperloop in these tunnels, and that ship has sailed. Like now it's
Oh
Teslas, and
God,
then
yeah.
but I think at one point Elon Musk even admitted that he was only selling the Hyperloop idea in these tunnels as a way to kill high-speed rail in California.
Yeah, he
Remember
did.
that?
That was a line that was buried in that Elon Musk hagiography of a biography that sort of became a bit of a scandal a little bit after the fact, which raises an interesting question. I have no reason to assume this is the case, but perhaps it's no accident that this is happening in Nashville, a city that's on the cusp of potentially a multimodal revolution. It's the way for the Boring Company and Republicans and state government to basically say, we're going to cut that off at the knees, because why do you really need transit when we're building this amazing tunnel, which might be the beginning in their minds of some wacky Tesla car tunnel network? Yeah, I'm really getting angry in this episode today. Not because of tech problems, but because we keep talking about Elon Musk. We can only do this like once every like a quarter at the most, because it gets me riled
every
up.
week.
Well, we could do it once every week. Honestly.
No, you're right. You have to be careful of exactly what you're saying, because this is like, it's one thing if they just did it and it was totally separate, but it's keeping us from doing sort of the stuff we need and we should be doing. Like if it's replacing what would work. And like, yes, this might get a few people in Teslas to the airport quicker, but it's not going to solve big problems. Like, again, when I go back to the fundamental problems with Futurama, like getting everyone into the tunnels in a Tesla, you can't do it. Like you can't. So it's something that when you logically think about it, it makes no sense, but we keep doing it again and again. Like cities are, I mean, not Nashville in the same way the other ones were, but it feels like we're just repeating the same problems, and it probably end up the same as the other cities where nothing ever happens, but still it's a distraction.
No, and that distraction is real, because it creates an argument to basically hold off on doing stuff that would be genuine progress. And it's funny. I was actually skeeting something along these lines on a different issue earlier today, when there was a Wall Street Journal editorial today, or an op-ed, I should say, that was basically saying like, well, we don't really have to worry about pedestrian safety for cars anymore, because we have the technology now to basically eliminate all pedestrian crashes. And I was like, not true. Not true at night. Not true if you're going over 40 miles an hour. Not true for lots of reasons, which Wes and I know a lot. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, you yourself probably know. But the reality is
not true the darker your skin is either. Like that.
Also true. Thank you. No, that's right. But that sort of a claim is a great excuse to say, well, we don't have to worry about car bloat, about cars being too big and too heavy, because the technology is going to fix it at some point soon. And I find that to be really pernicious. Peter Norton, the historian, has done some really important work along these lines in his book Autonorama, and I think these issues are real. We should. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We should hit our second roundabout topic, if you're good with it, because I know you have a lot to say about this one. It's actually in both of our wheelhouses a bit. If you're good
all right,
with it.
Let's do it.
Speed humps, the prosaic protrusions of pavement, as I called them in an article I wrote last week in Bloomberg City Lab. I actually didn't call it there. I think I called it that on Blue Sky, whatever. But I love speed humps. I got really interested in them because they seem to be these simple sorts of mundane mobility innovations that at a relatively low cost, only $5,000 a pop, can reliably slow down speeding vehicles, but also avoid crashes, as has happened in Detroit, which has been a first mover on speed hump installation, thousands of them across Detroit neighborhoods. And what's interesting, too, is that people actually really like them when they live nearby most of the time. Not always, but most of the time, because they have this sort of like NIMBY mentality where they assume that it's the drivers coming from elsewhere who are slowed down by the speed humps. This is something I heard when I was talking to city DOT officials all around about it. So I find speed humps to be this sort of like really interesting, affordable, practical, effective, maybe politically popular countermeasure to speeding that you can't do them everywhere, but you can do them in a lot of places, and they're kind of great. That's my take. But Wes, maybe you have a different one.
I will, starting with where you do get the pushback is often not from the people that live on the street where the speed hump is going. It's from the parallel streets. Like, because those folks are worried that the traffic on whatever that original street was is going to get pushed to their street. So you get a different kind of feedback. But now you're right. They do work. They're simple. Like, they're always going to have pushback from like the fire marshal and people if you're trying to put it on an arterial, which is where most of our safety problems are happening. So, that's one of, maybe we could be doing them on arterials differently and maybe not the exact same way. Like, I know when I was in Bogota, they had a big arterial that had a huge pedestrian safety problem in a very low income neighborhood. And they put like it's almost like a speed table. It's like a giant speed hump that works for pretty high speeds. And they used some Swedish design. Like, they said they pulled it literally out of a Swedish design book, like verbatim.
Cool.
And it seemed to work pretty well because they had like 3 of them in a row through this one area with this pedestrian. So taking it a step further, like, we need to not just be doing it on local roads and collectors. We need it on the bigger, more dangerous roads. It might look differently, but it's something that I guess it's a proven countermeasure to speeding, which is a proven countermeasure to helping safety. So, like, you need more of it.
Yeah, and it seems to me like this, like speed humps are, they get some controversy, but it's nothing like a full road diet or automatic speed enforcement. So, if you're thinking like a politician or like a city DOT official trying to maintain support from your electeds, you can sort of install the speed humps and save your political capital, perhaps, for those heavier lifts that are where you get inevitable pushback with things like the road diet, right?
Yeah. No, the other pushback you do get is people that don't know the difference between a speed bump and a speed hump, like the parking
Well,
lot style speed bumps. Like, a lot of people think that's what you're talking about if you start talking about speed humps, and they're anti them at first until they realize like it's a different thing.
Well, that's one thing I sort of learned from the article. There's this whole constellation of like vertical speed mitigation sort of structures. You've got the speed bumps that have a sharper angle up. They really force you to slow down. They're usually in parking
Yep.
lots. The speed humps that can be on local streets. You just referenced speed tables that are like flatter up top so they can work on faster streets. And then you've got speed cushions, which have cutouts that can enable fire trucks and emergency response vehicles to go through them without slowing down because they have wider axles.
Yeah.
But narrow axle cars will still have to slow down. But I thought this was, I'm trying to think about some of these sorts of practical things that can be really useful tactics in a moment where, there's not money floating around in the way there has been in the past for a lot of cities thinking about street safety. It feels to me like this is one that might have some oomph. So it was fun playing around with it for a while. I enjoyed putting the story together.
For my book, I did dig into the history of this kind of traffic calming, and I actually found a different story than what you found. Like, it might be a little bit different, but I did find that Chatham, New Jersey, in like 1905 or 6, did what is essentially a raised crosswalk, where the whole
Oh yeah,
crosswalk they raised it
wow.
5 inches. So it was essentially a speed hump. And but even if you dig into that, like somebody had done an article from 20 years ago or so, like they were digging through like the city council minutes or something, and that city council was referencing some other city that did something similar. So it might even go back before Chatham, New Jersey, and like.
Can't hear you, Wes. Wes, I think you're cursed today. This is a curse session because I can see you, but I can't hear you. If you are listening and watching along with us, I appreciate you sticking around. We see you, Wes. I don't think we can hear you. Say something. Got nothing. Nothing. Wes, do you want to call it for here, or do you want to try? We can frankly end it here and come back and finish the recording separately, or do you want to try to turn things off and come back? It's up to you. No, wait, no, we just got it, Wes. We just got you. We just got you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
It's a little bit of an echo, but that's okay. Okay.
I don't know what's happening today. Let's see.
I think it might work now. No, there's still the echo, but
how about that?
I thought, yep, better.
Can you hear me?
Yep, it's fine. It's fine.
Good times.
Yeah. We honestly, we got through 2 episodes without major technical glitches, so we were overdue.
Yeah.
It had to happen.
I felt like I'd fixed the volume issue, but now we're running into this other stuff. So here we go.
You know, it's all good. Let's do a quick question from a reader because they were excited to get a thought really from, I think actually this is about speed humps.
Okay.
But this is, I think, one that frankly, I don't know the answer to, and you might. But it was mentioned I mentioned this in my article that a lot of municipalities and jurisdictions advise against installing speed humps on roads or streets that have more than an 8% grade. You familiar with that guideline?
Vaguely. I know what you're talking about, but
so the person, this is Stephanie in Boston who asked the question, said that 8% grade limit for speed up installation is completely made up. SFMTA in San Francisco and Boston have done studies. So I suspect no one wants to be the first out of the gate to tell everyone that they're putting speed humps on streets with 12% grades for liability concerns. But her point is we could be doing them on steeper streets and we shouldn't limit ourselves with a really effective countermeasure for speeding. And my question to you is, does that strike you as a reasonable perspective, or do you know some reason why we might be restricting speed up installation to 8% grades?
So this is a bit of speculation on my part, but I think it's going to be similar to a lot of the stuff I dug into for my book, where you have these kind of rules and you dig into where they come from, and there's very little behind it. It's some back of the envelope thing that somebody did way back when, and I feel like this is probably one of those because, like, you know, this person said, is that San Francisco is doing it on much steeper streets and it's working. So I would say let's, you know, treat it more empirically. Let's test it in places where the grade is steeper and see how it works, to see, because I can't think of a ton of reasons why it wouldn't work on steeper grades, especially if it's like well signed and things like that. I mean, it should, like, it shouldn't make any bit of a difference where it is. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, you're the engineer, I'm not, but I appreciate the question. I think everybody who thinks about street safety should be asking questions like Stephanie is, like, well, why? Why is the rule this way? And I'll give you credit, Wes. I think that was the overarching theme of your book, is challenge these sorts of assumptions that we make. I mean, one, I think this was in your book. It's been a while since I read it now, but one that I'm familiar with is the idea of the 85th percentile rule, which was originally conceived of as a way of setting speed limits for rural roads and highways. Nobody ever thought of it as a way of as a treatment for cities or urban areas, and we just assume that it is now in so many places like Texas. So I mean, this is I think it's worth. I think you're right. I think we should do a study, and I appreciate Stephanie raising the question.
All right. So I have a question that I got an email about. This is from Christine in Florida. So she was asking about the Tesla autopilot ruling, I guess being from Florida. Yeah. She was wondering if that, we talked about precedent a little bit. I mean, does this going to set a precedent for holding other car and tech companies more accountable, or is this going to be more of a one-off case? And I think this also relates to a lot of your work on car bloat. Like, there's a thinking that these car companies could be held more liable for building cars that we know are more dangerous to, like, pedestrians. Because I'm thinking of this question more along those lines.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to, get out ahead of my skis, but I'm not sure the extent to which the court cases, I understand it in Florida, would necessarily apply to other car companies with ADAS systems that are level 2, like Ford or GM or whatever, because they aren't overpromising in the way that Tesla is. They're not calling their system autopilot and full self-driving, and that sort of illusion or that misunderstanding or exaggeration, whatever you want to call it, was an important sort of part of the court case in Florida. And that's a strategy. That's sort of like, I consider it deception. That's a deliberate strategy, business strategy, I would argue, by Tesla that other companies are not pursuing. So I think it could be precedent setting for court cases related to Tesla. I at first glance do not necessarily see how this would in the same way apply to other automakers, because they're a lot more responsible in how they label this stuff and how they talk about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's tricky because, I mean, we do know that a lot of these other bigger SUVs are going to be more dangerous than the other, but a lot of that comes down to, what's required of our safety standards and the labeling of that. Like when you go buy a car, like they talk about, the 5-star ratings or whatever, but it's for the people in the vehicle, right? Like we could have rules
Completely
that talk about the people that are outside the vehicle, and knowing, what vehicle you choose has more or less chance of hurting somebody outside. Like,
I'm not sure anyone cares, Wes. That's the problem. I don't think anyone cares about whether their car is going to hurt someone outside of the vehicle. They worry about their loved ones inside the car, and they worry about themselves. That's just the reality. That's why we need regulations.
Years ago, I remember being in San Francisco with a good friend of mine, and he had like a Mini Cooper, and he was just cruising around town at high rates of speed. And I basically recited those stats that a lot of us in this world know, like at 20 miles per hour, the chance of a pedestrian getting hit being a fatality. At 30, goes from 15% to 45% to like 80% at 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. And I don't know if this lasted or persisted to this day, but in that moment, he's like, oh man, I never knew any of that. And he started driving way slower in the city, at least. And that's San Francisco, where there's a ton of pedestrians everywhere. So, maybe there are some people that might make different decisions if we give them the knowledge, but we don't have a system set up where we provide that.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Wes, I feel like we both need a drink at this point.
It's about time.
We've gotten through. It's been an adventurous episode. What do you have? What are you sipping this evening?
I have a collaboration whiskey. It's Leopold Brothers. It's a distillery not far from my house here in Denver. It's a family distillery, but they're doing a collaboration with George Dickel, and they call it 3 Chamber. You can see it there, and it's pretty good. So that's what I'm having. What about you?
I am having a Pinot Noir that I got 2 days ago at Trader Joe's, because that's what I had handy, and that's what I'm going with. So
Awesome.
On that happy note, cheers.
Cheers
to smooth technology.
Very good.
When
we'll be back?
When we'll be back? Yes. So so Wes was just in Banff in Alberta. I'm actually traveling in Europe for a couple weeks shortly. So we're going to do a non-live recording while I'm over there at a time TBD. But the next live recording, for those who want to chance it with us, it'll be September 11th, Thursday, September 11th at 6 p.m. ET, which is our standard. You can always contact both of us at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And you can reach me on my website, davidzipper.com. I also have a newsletter, Paved with Good Intentions, you can sign up for there. And Wes, maybe you've changed your mind, but usually you don't want anyone to talk to you. Is that right?
I do have a newsletter, and I did send one out before the first podcast. And I heard from a few folks they wish I'd done it before the second, so I did it again today. So people could sign up to my newsletter on my website, or they can find me on Blue Sky. I'm kind of on there sometimes.
You are on there sometimes. I can vouch for that. But we really do appreciate all of you being with us for the first few episodes. If you have a moment, leaving a review or telling a friend is always appreciated. But with that, we will see you soon. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for coming. Get home or get wherever you're going safe.